As a product manager, it can be a bit of a challenge to make sure we can translate what this thing is and why it's so valuable, especially if, a marketing or product marketing team are not necessarily involved at the beginning stages of ideation.
Hi, I'm your host, Magali Pellissier, and I'm a product manager. Each week, I show you the other side of a product. I interview the people who contribute to making products a success. They are engineers, writers, marketers, support analysts, UX designers, or even salespeople. Not only will I give them the credit they deserve, but we will uncover what makes a good product and product manager from their perspectives. Over the next 3 weeks, I'm releasing special episodes in a debate format. Think about it like a friendly competition between PMs and their stakeholders. On one hand, a team of 2 stakeholders with the same role, for example, UX designers. On the other hand, a team of 2 product managers, including myself. There are 3 rounds, 1 per week, during which I give a word to start with. Each person shares the first word that comes to their mind when they hear it. And we discuss, debate, share our perspectives. At the end of each episode, we vote, and the person who came up with the best word wins a point for their team. There will be debates, battles, and hopefully some alignment between PMs and their stakeholders. Stakeholder management is a key skill for product managers. So just as you are obsessed with listening to your customers, let's hear from your stakeholders. Welcome to this first debate between product management and product marketing. On the product marketing team, I am pleased to welcome 2 of my previous guests, Charlie Penwarden and Lauren Macpherson. In episode 3, Charlie talked about how he combines marketing and UX together in his role as marketing director of the agency Ranrobincom and as a UX consultant. Charlie has worked on a number of exciting projects for in-house teams, agencies, and startups with a variety of clients, including one of the world's first adaptability assessment platforms in AQ&I, online course enhancement to the Future Learn platform, and events management software for AstraZeneca. In episode 4, I discussed with Lauren, who is the CCO at the product studio Eli5 and its sister company Noco. Day-to-day, she is responsible for planning and executing the business development, sales, and marketing strategies for both companies. She also works on the validation and launch of the in-house product Eli5 creates. If you missed those 2 episodes, I recommend listening to them. So this is the stakeholder team representing product marketing today. In team product management now, I am pleased to welcome Daryl Edwards, who is currently the Director of Product at Rhythm Software, an association management software company. At Rhythm Software, he leads the effort to build the right product for membership associations. Daryl is passionate about a customer-driven approach being the key to achieving product market fit. I will be the second member of the team. I am Magali, and I'm the lead product manager at RFI Global, a data and insights company. After a few years in the SaaS space, I took the leap for a challenge to build a startup within an established company and transform waterfall-style services into an agile product. I enjoy thinking holistically about the entire customer experience and creating work environments based on trust and openness, which is why I launched this podcast. So let's get started on the first round. So we've got team product marketing, which is Lauren and Charlie, and we have team product management, which is Daryl and myself today. So the first word we're going to discuss is product marketing. So I'll start with Lauren. What is the first word that comes to mind when I tell you product marketing?
I went with community. I think especially for the no-code community and Web3, everything is very community driven and everything needs to be quite personalized these days. Customers and users want to feel involved. And I think creating a community around your product where not only are you outputting information to them as a marketer, but you're also getting lots of feedback and lots of input from them is really essential to making something successful these days. So I went with that.
Great. Charlie, are you aligned with this, or do you have something else?
I am aligned with that, yeah, but I would say communication is my word to describe product marketing. I think mainly because it means, or product marketing for me is the connector between product and marketing. It's that in between. And I think as well, it's marketing communications is the way product marketing should be looked at, from how you connect in with the design, development, engineering, all of those teams. So I think to me, a good product marketing overview is communications.
Okay. Daryl, as a product manager, what comes to mind when I tell you product marketing?
So the word that comes to mind first is value. And, with any marketing, any delivering of, a product, it has to come with what value are we providing to our customers? What value are we providing to our market? And so that's where that's the first thing that pops into my head, where we're explaining what makes this so cool or so valuable, or why you need this, and also why our competitors don't have it, or what makes it different from our competitors. So that's why I went with value.
Okay. I love this one because I'm a product manager, maybe. So I agree with that. Okay. Because I'm the host of this podcast, and the podcast is about how we work together, I want to throw a bit of a controversial word. I would say challenge, because I find it hard to communicate that value, actually. So it goes back to your point, Charlie, and yours, Daryl, as well. How do we communicate with a product marketing team to really get our message across? Because sometimes it's in my head, I know what's the value, but how can I communicate it so that then the marketing team can translate it into something that can be shared in the user and with the community?
I think challenge is interesting. I thought you were going to go with collaboration when you, but as a product manager, a product leader, it can be a bit of a challenge to make sure we can translate what this thing is and why it's so valuable. Especially if a marketing or product marketing team are not necessarily involved at the beginning stages of ideation. It goes through ideation, it goes through execution, and then we're getting close to launching this thing. Now we have to explain, we have to collaborate, we have to make sure that we are aligned on what makes this, piece of functionality or this, piece of the product valuable. So I think that that's a good word. And I probably underestimate how challenging it has been to get things, as we're launching things and making sure that we're explaining, why we did it. Because sometimes you will ideate on something a year ago, it'll get done. And not that you forget why you did it, but you've been working on so many different initiatives and projects. That could be another part of the challenge in making sure that you remember, or you have a process that well defines the value that this is going to provide to the market.
Yeah, I think for me, value is the operative word in what you were saying, Daryl, and I think as well, Magali, like value proposition throughout the whole process of product development and also in product marketing is all about perceived value, internal perceived value, and then external perceived value. So value proposition right from the start, very clear from a business perspective, very clear through to, for UX, design, engineering, and then also marketing. I think if you can have that value proposition evolve and kind of grow as a working document or wherever it lives, I think that is, for me, a real key to the success, almost a guarantee of success for a product that comes to market, or one that has to go through different iterations of its life cycle. It's definitely value proposition.
So who actually comes up with that value proposition? Do you think that they should come from the product manager because they know how to express the value for the user? Do you think product marketing does, 90% of the job? Does it come from the user and the community? Can you source the information directly from there? Maybe, Lauren, do you have a view of where you get most of your information to create that value proposition?
I think the value proposition at the beginning is definitely partly from the team, but I think once that product is launched, or even beta launched, you want to be taking everything from the user. I mean, quite often we have released products, MVPs or early versions, and the users have found a completely different use for it to what we were expecting. And so I think when you're talking about challenges as well, one of the challenges is that there's a lot of luck when it comes to releasing products and marketing. There's a lot of trial and error. Some things work, some things don't. Sometimes you can do everything right and it's just in the market at the wrong time. Sometimes you can release something that isn't quite ready, but people will still love it and build a community around it. So I think it's one of those things that I think you have to start with a really strong value proposition so that you're all aligned, like you're saying. But I think it has to be something that is flexible to change with the users, and it can change over time. I'm sure that happens with, most products once they're out in the real world with real people. They'll always find interesting ways to use something that you weren't really expecting.
Yeah, and I think the value actually starts, because you mentioned, like, does product own it? Who kind of defines it? I think the customers help define it and the market help define it. And, that goes through the product management team. So I think if you're collecting requirements, or if you're understanding a problem and you're working with customers very early in the ideation phase, they help define that, value prop for whatever piece of functionality that you're looking to launch or whatever initiative you're looking to undertake. Because at the end of the day, they have to find childlike joy whenever you deliver it to them. So I think it starts with the customer and, gets hardened by product with everything that they're hearing from the customer, from the market, to help them deliver that to the rest of the organization.
Does that mean that sometimes you put a prototype in front of users or a beta version and they come up with things that you didn't think about? They're going to use the product in a totally different way. So you say that changes the value, but it can also change the problem because you perceived that they had such a problem, and then you realize, oh, actually, we're solving a different problem. So how does that work when actually it's more than just the value they get that changes, but it's the actual problem is different, or you uncover other problems? Does that resonate? Has this ever happened to you?
That has happened. Whenever I have, been part of a launch or a delivery or an early access, there's always something that we didn't think about. There's always something, once you see software, once the customer sees the software, they're like, oh yeah, I really need this thing. Oh, I forgot about that. Oh, I didn't realize this meant X. I thought it meant Y. So that has happened, and it can change. I haven't found that it has changed the overall problem. It's just the problem maybe expands a little, it evolves, but it hasn't completely changed the problem that we're solving. And, one of the ways I've tried to reduce that is, like I mentioned, when we are looking at a new initiative, having a set of customers that I'm working with before we get to even talking with internal stakeholders, the executive team, developers, to get level of effort, just to make sure that this thing that I'm thinking about is viable. And we can go through it in depth enough where we can get, 80 to 90% there whenever we get to early access. So earlier in my career, I saw it a lot. At Rhythm, the way I work my process now, I'm seeing it a lot less, because I have key customers involved so early that we are more likely to hit the mark once we have something to click around in, versus doing things in silos and then throwing over the fence to customers and they have not been involved. And if they're not involved, we're not understanding what problems we're solving.
Cool. So I would say that my favorite word is, because I think it summarizes the whole thing, it's value. And yeah, you have to communicate it to get your input from the community. It can sometimes be a challenge. I don't know what everybody else votes for.
Yeah, I agree with value. I think as soon as you said it, I was like, well, yeah, this is where everything is built from and everything revolves around. So I would agree with that, begrudgingly.
Yeah, value gets my vote as well. I think whilst Daryl didn't initially say it, the sentence structure was all based around value. And I think that definitely shows, purely because of the challenges you have in early stages for stakeholders, for the business, what the vision is and how the vision is set. Proving that all the way through to customers is such a lengthy process and complex process. I think if you always anchor back to value and the value proposition, then yeah, I think you can't go too wrong.
I'm not going to do my own. So I liked communication, because you can have a great value, but the methods and how often, and your process for properly communicating that value to the market, to your customers, is just as important.
Yeah, I suppose value without communication it's one of those things, isn't it? What's I think, Magali, on our last episode you asked me, the kind of chicken and egg situation, but for me, I chose marketing over product when you presented me with those two ideas, and the reason I chose that is because you can certainly undermarket a great product and not have as much success as you can with a fairly basic product that's well marketed, well communicated, well defined in its value. I've seen far more success from maybe lower quality products than I have done with really great products that have unfortunately fallen down in their marketing communications.
Okay, so that's a good point. How do we make sure we nail this piece? So I think there's two aspects to communication. There is me as a product manager talking to you in marketing to explain to you the value, and then you translating that to our users. So let's talk about the first section. In my head as a product manager, I know what the problem is. I have all of this information because I absorbed all the content from the user interviews, all the feedback I've seen in emails, support ticket, and all of that. So is the challenge that you've just raised, Charlie, which is when we don't manage to communicate the value to the user due to a miscommunication internally? We're not on the same page. We don't understand each other. Or is it really due to the way we translate this for the user?
It's a very good question. I'm not too sure on the answer on that. I think it's often the problem hasn't been well defined enough, and the solution is just from a vision that is, I want to create this type of app or website or whatever to solve this type of problem, but it's not as detailed or has not been proven in the market via early stage research. I would say that probably leads to poor marketing communications at the end, is a poorly defined value proposition internally, and that can often be pulled from pillar to post in different teams, different stakeholders, different shareholders. And I think that probably doesn't give marketing communications a great handover to be able to do their job well enough. I would say it probably stems with there, but I'd be interested to hear other opinions on that.
I agree. I think if it gets to the point where we're unsure as we're communicating, then we were never sure to begin with. We were not sure what problem we're solving, and not how viable, but whether or not this is a problem that we need to solve or should have prioritized. And I think in that early research phase, if you're doing it properly, you'll understand. Product management will understand what the value that we're solving, and it should provide less of a challenge to being able to translate that to product marketing and marketing teams.
I think I also see a lot of really poor persona work done. And I get a lot of groans whenever I say personas at work because people don't like them. I'm not the biggest fan, but they're completely necessary. And if you don't have an idea of who the people are that you're trying to sell to at the end of the day and who the user's going to be, even if there's 3, 5, 10, I don't really know how many everyone chooses, but usually around 5 is quite a good number for us. And if you don't know who that value is for and where you're trying to put it and place it in their hands and what they're going to be doing with it and where they're going to be when they're using it, what they're going to be doing with it and how they're going to use it, where they're going to use it, why they're going to use it, you just have no idea where that value is going to translate either. And I see a lot of poor persona work getting in the way of value reaching people as well, which I always encourage people to do, but they seem to dislike them a lot.
Yeah, personas have got a bad rep recently, and I know the Jobs to Be Done framework is pretty effective and driving a motivational need or the emotional need of why somebody's doing something and why they would need a tool or software or whatever to use it. That works, but I think that doesn't help anyone else who's working on the product necessarily. It may help the psychology behind the marketing communications and really drive some emotive messaging and the copy and things like that and what you display on the website. But I don't see how just running on motivations or Jobs to Be Done framework helps the internal team, because as human nature, we're so very judgmental, and we love human faces and things like that. It's so easy to just get, when you really write a detailed persona or multiple personas, to be able to help when design are focusing on a new feature, or when engineering need to come up with a different piece of functionality. Having these people in mind as if you're building for them, as well as the needs and the motivations of what they have to achieve. I think that's the perfect, that's perfect from a UX perspective for me.
So, Lauren, I think you've mentioned to me before as well that personas have a bad reputation. People don't like them. I'm of the ones who find them very useful. In my previous company, they even had names. So you could say, hey, this is Brianna. She wants to do this. And they had their pronouns. And they had all sorts of traits of personality. And you could refer to them very easily. I don't know exactly what you mean by people don't like them. I don't know. I've always had experiences where people seemed to like them. Not that they use them all the time. You have to keep reminding people to think about the user and all of this. But I didn't see any particular challenge. So can you tell me more about this?
I think it just provides them with another point of friction. And I think when you're building something and it's getting frustrating and you're constantly having to refer back to this persona, and they're the thing getting in the way sometimes of what you think and what you want, you tend to get frustrated. And it's easy to get frustrated with a persona that doesn't exist, really. So I think a lot of frustration gets taken out on the imaginary people who sometimes do get in the way of an idea you might come up with. And I think my objections to things will quite often be based on, okay, but how is that going to fit in with this persona that we've decided? And you can change them and they can be flexible, but I think it ends up just being a point of friction that just gets a little bit frustrating. It's pretty simple, but most of the time, like you say, they are really useful and people like having them around. But it's just another hurdle to jump over sometimes.
Yeah, I think my experience with persona hate or persona gate, whichever you want to call it, is and you have to kind of bring it to life with examples. And when I've done some pitch work with agencies before, their framework that we created was mood, motivation, environment, device, and location. And it was called the MEDAL framework. So if you can understand the type of mood somebody's in, because if you looked at a persona for a 35-year-old man who lives in Bournemouth and is interested in XYZ, and you bring this persona out, his mood is going to be the same as a completely different persona, like 48-year-old mum from London. This is going to be the same mood and motivation behind booking a holiday as it is when you're maybe filing your taxes or going through insurance and having to pay out with something. So I think persona hate gets hate, and rightfully so, when it's just focused on one and it isn't very flexible. And when you do look at mood and why someone's doing something and where they are, because someone might be on a mobile phone when their kids are jumping around them on the sofa at home at 9 o'clock at night when they're trying to file their taxes, for example. Or is it likely they're going to be booking a holiday there at that point, but then filing their taxes on a desktop in an office in a really quiet environment? So I think that's the only reason why I've seen personas getting a bit of hate, because they can be a little bit too focused on someone that may span multiple different demographics, human demographics of people. But yeah, I'm very much in team persona, but I understand why they get a bit of hate.
Actually, you've mentioned something about kids jumping on the sofa, and it makes me think, have you adjusted your personas with the pandemic? Because now that people are working remotely a lot more, maybe, the mood they're in, the tools they're using, they used to be, on their mobile phone during the commute, but they're not anymore because they're at home. Have you adjusted those personas to reflect the changes in the work environment and how we live?
I wouldn't say I have specifically, but we've certainly been aware of, added stress, added burnout. I think making things really simple, and one thing that I've been close to is making sure that expectations and step-by-step processes are really, really clear early on. I think that negates a lot of frustration, user frustration, when using products, digital products that I think we've been just a little bit more aware and a bit more conscious of making it very clear and meeting expectations early, rather than necessarily any direct product changes or persona changes and things like that. But yeah, that's my only experience.
Daryl, what about you?
Yeah, I would say kind of tweaks to their reality, right? In a post-2020, pandemic world, and especially geared towards some of the personas that I've dealt with, especially, let's say, around events, where people are used to putting on these large exhibit shows and stuff like that. And that's a key component of softwares I've worked with. We've had to tweak that change in the world has tweaked how they function and need to function, which has helped inform how, certain things they might need to make their life easier. So no complete overhauls, but just kind of tweaks to, some of their reality and, how we can provide benefits to those types of personas.
I'm again the same. I think that some tweaks were made, but we found that engagement because obviously a lot of the stuff that we build enables you to work remotely. We just found that actual engagement with the product and also with us improved. And so I think maybe it's helped us to improve our personas a little bit and get to know the user a little bit more, because obviously they suddenly were working from home and these tools that they had enabled them to do it better. And so they were excited to give us feedback and get involved and change it and update it. And so I think it just helped us get at that little bit more engagement and helped us to get to know them better, but also they got to know us better. And so the more they got to know us and the technology that we were creating, we get really good suggestions from them now. So I think it kind of worked both ways as well. We just have a much better relationship that works both ways because we've been communicating just that bit more. So yeah, communication again.
Right. It's a shame we only have to pick one word because all of them are quite efficient at defining me. I think I'm glad we aligned, because there could have been like a debate, like product marketing thinking, no, we advocate for this word. And then PM saying, no, we really want that. But we all seem to agree on the value. Cool. Okay. So that's 1 point for the PM team. Yeah. Right. Actually, I was about saying to go back on the root cause of why we don't manage to get the communication, the value right for our users. It's from a French writer. So I'll say it in French and then I'll translate it. Ce que l'on conçoit bien s'énonce clairement et les mots pour le dire arrivent aisément. So what that means is that if you really understand, if you have a good understanding of the thing, then it's easy to explain and you can find the words to explain it very easily. And I think that summarizes what we said initially, which was, okay, if we don't manage to get the value right in the messaging for our users, okay, either we got it wrong, and that comes from testing and from the approach, we didn't validate the value, or internally we didn't have that shared understanding, which enables us to really put the right words on it and to really be aligned before we share the message across. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to listen to this podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode and that it has enabled you to understand your stakeholder and inspired you to better work with them to make successful products. If so, please share the link with your friends and colleagues. And if you want to suggest some topics, some guests, if you have questions you'd like me to ask during the interviews, or if you have any feedback, you can write to me at magalipellissier@hotmail.fr.